The invention of the steam engine revolutionized the growth and the development of the farming industry in the Red River Valley throughout the late 19th and early 20th centuries. As new settlers traveled by steam to farm the area, they reacted by looking for new and better ways to farm. In the late 1870s, they began to harness steam power to help harvest crops and transport their produce. This reform in farm technology eventually led to the mechanization of farming, which has allowed the Red River Valley to become a worldwide leader in crop production. Steam power was first harnessed back in 1698. Thomas Savery invented the steam pump in order to help pump water out of mines. This revolutionary way of power was then transformed into the steam engine in 1711 by Thomas Newcomen. James Watt, who is given credit for perfecting it, sold his first engine in 1769. These engines were able to power machines that had formerly relied on water power to operate. This revolutionized where and how work was done, and more work was then shifted into factory-made products. It also revolutionized the travel with the invention of the railroad and the steamboat. The Industrial Revolution began over in England and Europe in the late 1700s and quickly spread to America as Americans became more self-reliant as a nation. In 1803, the United States of America gained 827,987 square miles when it signed the Louisiana Purchase Treaty with France. President Thomas Jefferson quickly sent the Lewis and Clark expedition to explore this uncharted territory to find what natural resources were available for our country. They found a rich land in the valley along the Red River, which they believed would be great farmland. They also found a large number of Native Americans who were living on this land. Over the next 50 years, the land would mostly remain unsettled due to lack of transportation to and from this region. There were also a number of issues with the Native Americans who were resistant to the white settlers coming into this area. Then, in 1859, the first steamboat revolutionized travel to the Dakotas and the Red River Valley, allowing people to travel and ship items much faster than previous years. This method of transportation opened the doors for settlers to quickly settle the area. This did not sit well with the Native Americans, and after many land battles, they finally signed the treaties with the U.S. government and removed reservations. This opened up more land, which was now available to be settled. In 1862, President Lincoln signed the Homestead Act, which gave an even greater incentive to settle the land. While the steamboat brought settlers in, there were still many problems with the river freezing over in the winter. Winters in the Red River Valley were brutal, and without supplies in and out in the winter, it was a very hard life. After the Civil War and the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad, Americans and new immigrants were looking for ways to make their fortunes. The United States government was anxious to settle the middle of the plains and began to offer land grants to railroad companies to help do so. J. Cook and the Great Northern Pacific Railroad was able to secure the land grant from the federal government, which was 10.7 million acres of the land in North Dakota. This allowed investors from the east to invest in farmland in the Red River Valley. At this time, the new and revolutionary bonanza farms were created, hoping to capitalize on a rich farm area and produce a cash crop to be sold across the United States. These farms would use the steam-powered railroad to bring supplies into them as well as to sell their produce. A few years later, businessman James J. Hill also saw the potential that the Red River Valley had as an economic region. He realized that the steamboat had its limitations and wanted to build a railroad through the river valley. After receiving land grants from the Minnesota Land Grant, he was able to sell land around his tracks to Norwegian and Swedish settlers for a very low price. Hill wanted the new farmers to succeed since that would continue to help his railroad business, so he offered classes in agriculture to make sure the new farmers in the area would learn to work the land and stay in the Red River Valley. Around 1879, Hill eventually took over the Northern Pacific and built what was later known as the Great Northern Railway, which eventually went north along the Red River between Minnesota and North Dakota and then across the state of North Dakota. During this time, over 100,000 immigrants entered the area when the railroad first entered it. As settlers came to the Red River Valley to claim their 160 acres of land through the Homestead Act of 1862, many of them found the harsh reality of farming in the Dakota Territory. These farmers had a tough job of breaking sod on the prairie. Farmers were using horse and oxen to do this job. Shortly before most settlers came to the Red River Valley, the steam plow had been put into operation. This first mechanization of farming revolutionized how farmers looked at farming. Work that had taken many days can now be done in less time. The reaction of the farmers in the Red River Valley to this revolutionary tool was to utilize it. Abraham Lincoln, speaking at Milwaukee, Wisconsin on September 30th, 1859, the successful application of steam power to farm work is something greatly needed, especially a steam plow. It is not enough to make a machine operated by steam that will really plow. To be successful, it must, all things considered, plow better than can be done with animal power. The reality of it was, while there were many good things with the steam engines on the farms, there were also many improvements that needed to be made. The steam engines that were used on farms and tractors were very expensive and broke down very easily. Farmers spent a lot of time fixing these huge machines. NDSU Ag School held classes in the early 1900s educating farmers on how to fix and maintain these engines. Most of the large bonanza farms utilized this type of steam engines as they worked extremely large amounts of land. Most of the bonanza farms range in size from 3,000 to 65,000 acres in size. Without the steam engine and eventually mechanization, the cost of running these farms would have outweighed their profits. This demand pushed for more mechanization, and there were constant developments in farming equipment. While the bonanzas were thriving and pushing forward using steam and mechanization, smaller farms had a harder time keeping up with this technology. Due to the cost of the problems in the large steam tractors, many of the smaller farms did not all use these new and revolutionary machines, but they did use steam power. Large steam threshing machines that used horsepower along with steam power and manpower revolutionized the way wheat was harvested. It allowed farmers to grow even more crops than they had in the past.
Well, steam was very important in the expansion of farming and during the steam revolution, the demands of miles and miles, and they could literally farm acres and acres and acres because of the steam, which made it more efficient, made it faster, and gave us the men to operate the machinery.
While the steam engine revolutionized farming and moved farmers away from the traditional horse and oxen power, it was quickly replaced by the gas engine, which reformed farming, making it a completely mechanized industry. Today, the Red River Valley continues to be a world leader in farming and in mechanization. Newer and larger machinery is produced each year using the latest technology. According to a report by the Christian Science Monitor, North Dakota has been the leading wheat-producing state in 2010 and 2011 and accounts for 16% of U.S. production. 1/5 of its crop usually comes from the Red River Valley. While the steam engine is no longer a part of farming done today, the reform in farming that it created still is felt over 130 years later, making farming a completely mechanized business. From its beginning, steam power has made an impact on the settlement and the farming of the Red River Valley. The railroads and the steamboats gave farmers a way to travel and transport their crops from the area. Its early use on farms and threshing and in tractors helped reform farming, making it a completely mechanized business. Today, its revolutionary impacts can be felt throughout the Red River Valley.
Thank you, Jennifer and Parker. Thank you. That was a 6th grade project. You know, and when you think about how we used to write papers, and now, that content was all there, along with images of the source material in an interview. Pretty remarkable. Thank you for sharing that with us. And we have one more special guest.